I commend everybody who's spoken for keeping their speeches brief, and we now move to the front bench contributions. I call Luke Taylor.
Thank you very much, Sir Mark. It's a pleasure to serve under your chairship. I would like to begin by thanking the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this crucial debate, and also by paying tribute to the Minister for her work in raising awareness on the tragic cost of violence against women and girls over the last few years. Today, I want to draw attention to an issue that, in my opinion, is a critical front in the overall struggle to end the epidemic of violence against women and girls, an issue that far too often goes underreported, unrecognised and unappreciated. That is the crime of stalking against women and girls, as the Honourable Member for Mid Cheshire has spoken about already. Stalking is a form of psychological violence that will affect approximately 1 in 5 women. It is an insidious crime that can shatter lives. I've heard from stalking victims who feel trapped, too afraid to leave their homes, constantly looking over their shoulder on their way to work. Yes.
Thank you for him for giving way, and I also thank the Honourable Member for Poplar and Limehouse for securing this incredibly important debate. Violence against women and girls on trains has risen by 50%, and the British Transport Police figures show that over a third of women using the rail system are likely to be assaulted. This is clearly unacceptable. So with this in mind, would my honourable friend agree with me that a more holistic system is needed to deal with the problem, to help the British Transport Police get a conviction and a suitable conviction for perpetrators, and also increase the perception of safety on our rail network overall?
Can I thank the Honourable Member, my honourable friend, for her intervention, and I absolutely agree with her comments. Victims of stalking often find themselves cutting ties with loved ones after fear of repercussions and putting them in danger. Even years after the harassment ends, stalking survivors are often left with lingering anxiety, trauma and pain. And in the most extreme cases, stalking can escalate to acts of physical violence, such as rape, and most tragically of all, murder. It is a crime that thrives on control, leaving victims in a constant state of fear and uncertainty. What makes stalking so dangerous is that it is often difficult to detect. A victim may not immediately notice someone following them, watching their movements or infiltrating their personal space online. The harassment might appear subtle at first, but can persist for years, eroding the victim's sense of safety and security. We cannot continue to leave the current legislation on stalking outside of the scope of public debate, because as it stands, the legal framework is just not robust enough for victims. And at a more fundamental level, we must change the way we think and talk about stalking. We must recognise its severity. I've heard harrowing accounts from women who, when they confide in friends, family, or even the police about their experiences, are often met with dismissive responses. Too often, the perpetrator is written off as nothing more than a clingy ex-boyfriend who simply cannot move on. Under the 2012 Protection of Freedoms Act, stalking offences are categorised into two distinct sections, 2A and 4A. These sections have created ambiguity as to how stalking is understood and prosecuted. Under Section 2A, it is defined as pursuing a course of conduct that amounts to stalking. This is considered a lesser offence, carrying a maximum sentence of up to 6 months in prison upon conviction. Under the more severe 4A offence, the perpetrator must be proven to have caused the victim fear of violence, significant alarm or a harassment which disrupts their daily life. It is clear that there are cracks in this framework. These two separate offences fail to recognise the total scope of stalking and its impact on victims' lives, and there are real barriers to pursuing a Section 4A offence. Victims are often left with the burden of proving the scale and severity of the stalking to convict perpetrators under the Section 4A offence, and they must also meet an unreasonably high threshold of evidence, demonstrating that the crime has disrupted their lives to a terrifying extent just to secure an appropriate sentence for the perpetrator. This process can take years, leaving victims trapped in fear while their tormentors remain at large. The burden placed on victims to provide extensive evidence often leads many pursuing a Section 4A offence to lose faith and withdraw from the criminal justice system altogether. In London alone, the 2024 London Stalking Review found that 45% of stalking victims felt compelled to abandon their pursuit of justice. This just is not good enough. I therefore urge the Government to reform the current legislative framework and take action to address this gap in our justice system. A new, singular and well-defined stalking offence must be created with the victims in mind. We cannot continue to allow years of harassment to persist before victims are able to seek prosecution. The 2024 London Stalking Review revealed another chilling statistic. 39% of recorded stalking offences experienced by under-18s fell under the more serious 4A category, which throws into sharp relief the importance of defining stalking laws as they pertain to social media, which many perpetrators use to harass and exploit young victims online. As I've already said, many young girls may be entirely unaware they are being stalked at first. Disturbingly, the ability of stalkers to hide behind anonymous accounts and leave few digital traces of their stalking is making that worse. It allows stalkers to hide and commit these crimes in ways that can easily be overlooked compared to in-person harassment. I recently met with a brave woman in my constituency who, as a victim of stalking herself, shared her fears about young girls in her family using social media platforms. These platforms enabled her perpetrator to harass her for years. She worries that her family members could fall into similar traps due to lack of awareness around recognising these behaviours. We must urgently raise awareness about how young people, especially girls, are targeted online, educating them, as has been spoken already, in schools about the warning signs of online stalking is critical to preventing this crime from escalating into more severe forms of harassment. So today I've focused on one aspect of violence against women and girls, among many others that demand our attention. I was appalled to read the National Police Chiefs Council and College of Policing national statement, which highlighted the staggering scale of this issue in our country. Every day, 3,000 crimes of violence against women and girls are recorded in this country. This is simply unacceptable, and we should be calling it out for what it is, an epidemic of coercion, control and violence that has no place in our society. I welcome this government's pledge to halve these numbers over the next decade and look forward to working cross-party to explore how myself and the Liberal Democrats can contribute to meaningful changes in the law on stalking and other acts of gendered violence, so that we can, within our lifetimes, stamp out this epidemic once and for all. Because no one can truly be free if they are forced to live in fear. And no woman or girl can live their life to the fullest whilst this scourge goes unchallenged. In the words of the White Ribbon campaigning group, who have done such an admirable job of putting and keeping this issue on the agenda, it starts with men. And the men in this room, myself included, must recognise our responsibility, hold ourselves accountable, challenge the warning signs and dangerous societal norms we see around us, and act now to protect women and girls across our country. Thank you.
Can I now call for the official opposition?